Hey, it's Dave, and welcome back to Zilog and Moto. On last week's episode, I alluded to the fact that this week's game was somewhat of a rarity, even though you might not expect it. So, what is this mysterious game? Well, here it is. Three Ninjas Kickback. What in the world is this game, you ask? Well, do you remember Egg Shen from Big Trouble in Little China? Squinty magical dude who helped Jack Burton defeat David Lopan? Sure you do. Well, that actor's actual name is Victor Wong, and he put together a decent little acting career in the late 80s and 90s. As part of that, he starred in a Disney-based kung fu film as the Mr. Miyagi to his three grandsons, called Three Ninjas. The movie was moderately successful, and while Disney passed on further films, Sony decided the series was worth pursuing and funded 3 additional sequels. For the second of those sequels, Three Ninjas Kick Back, Sony decided to produce a video game along with it, releasing versions for the Genesis, Sega CD, and Super Nintendo about a month after the film hit the theaters in summer of 1994. For some reason, the Sega CD version was only available with a double pack with Hook, but we'll deal with that at a later date. Right now, we're strictly concentrating on the Genesis version. Sony, who had bought British developer Psygnosis the year before, picked them to create the Genesis version, who then in turn handed off development to Malibu Interactive, a short-lived game developing arm of Malibu Comics. Now, I'm not exactly sure how all that works, and if perhaps Malibu wasn't really the developer of the game as much as Psygnosis was, because this feels like a Psygnosis game. If you're not aware, Psygnosis was famous as a developer-producer of many titles for the 8 and 16-bit home computers like the Commodore 64 and the Amiga, before branching into home console territory. And due to that, they were very familiar creating impressive 16-bit visuals and sounds. And without spoiling too much, the way this game looks and sounds reminds me very much of that 8 and 16-bit computer scene. I almost wonder if Malibu was just used to create the art for the game, being a comic book company, and that the actual game programming was handled by Psygnosis. Anyway, enough about the background of the game. Let's take a look at the card. And here's my copy of Three Ninjas Kick Back, and you can immediately see that unfortunately at some point this copy got a little bit wet. You can kind of see all the wrinkling in here and a tiny bit of fade up there. It wasn't enough really to cause the colors to bleed or tear, other than that tiny little spot up there. As the inner cover is fully intact. But you can definitely see the telltale wrinkling that never goes away when something like this happens. The spine's in decent shape. And if you flip to the back, there's a little bit of wrinkling in the middle here. But other than that, case is in good shape. No rips or tears or anywhere in the plastic. The hang tab's been removed, and actually it's pretty jagged. Like they kind of ripped it off. Might have to take my Dremel to that to smooth that out. Back to the front, the cover is just an interpreted version of the movie poster with the Psygnosis logo down here at the bottom. You can barely see it. And if you look over here at the corner, we've got the Sega pre-ESRB MA13 rating, which all I can figure was due to the fact that the game does involve weapon-based combat. However, there's no blood in the game, and it's clearly directed at a younger crowd. Also, since the word ninja will get you a ban in Britain, this game was only released in the United States, so they didn't even attempt to fight that battle. As we open the case, you can see the cartridge is in pretty good shape. But unfortunately, the manual, you can see here, is a bit rough. There's definitely some bending here on the spine side, and some color bleed at the top staple up here. I'm assuming it got wet at the same time. But it's intact. No pages torn, no missing pages. And I'm just going to ignore these rust stains from these staples here. Content of the manual is actually pretty good. some nice screenshots from the game, and also some nice artwork and pictures from the movie interspersed throughout in the manual. Everything's very clearly explained, complete with a rundown of all the in-game items, and there are a lot of them. Let me go to that page real quick. Here, yeah, look at all those items that are in this game. It's almost too many, if you ask me. There is a section at the end, again, for writing down passwords, the Ninja Notes section. I guess you could also, like, write down if you found, like, a secret area or something. The copy of this, so although on a good note, this copy did come in with a warranty reply card, which is nice to have. And if you're wondering why I bought a copy of this game in this condition, which, you know, admittedly isn't quite as nice as I usually like to pick up, it's because finding this game as a complete copy can be somewhat difficult and expensive. eBay prices have settled down a little since I bought it, but it's still going to run you between $80 and $100. So, did I just set that $100 on fire, or is there something worth playing here? Let's go to the game. Three Ninjas Kickback. Depending on who you talk to, this game can either be put in the beat-em-up category or action platforming. I'd argue for the latter, due to all the time you'll spend making futile attempts to avoid projectiles and jumping from ledge to ledge. While combat is part of the game, none of it's hand-to-hand, and I think for a game to truly be considered a beat-em-up, you need life bars, punches, kicks, etc. Okay, so now that we've settled what type of genre the game is, since it's based on a film, how close does the game follow the plot of the movie? Well, I can honestly say I've never seen the original film this was based on. No, seriously, I'm not lying and secretly a Three Ninjas fanboy. However, in doing this review, I did find out that the final movie in the series, Three Ninjas High Noon at Mega Mountain, features both Hulk Hogan and Jim Varney in one of his last film roles, so I will be making time to watch that at some point. Having said all that, I felt it was important to go ahead and watch the movie, in case there were references to it in the game I wasn't picking up, so I located a copy. And this was a poor decision. I really hope Victor Wong got paid a decent amount for these movies. Granted, it's not fair to judge the other three purely based on this one, but oh my. Now granted, I'm a 39-year-old watching a movie from 25 years ago aimed at 10-year-olds, so it's going to be problematic, but eesh. Anyway, the less said about that the better. This is a game review, not a movie review. To the question of how good an adaptation of the movie this game is, it's okay. There are major chunks of the plot that have been removed, such as there's no mention of the baseball game that was a fairly major subplot, or the female ninja, Mio, that they befriend in Japan that helps them ultimately defeat Koga. And there's definitely been some liberties taken with the level design. But other than drastically simplifying the plot of the movie, I think they captured the essence of the film, and it definitely feels like a closer interpretation of the movie than we saw previously with Cliffhanger. The first thing that I think most people notice about this game, if they play it in its default normal difficulty, is holy shit is it hard. This is not Sonic the Hedgehog or Super Mario Bros. Folks. There's three main problems with the game's design, and that's the amount of hits that the enemies will take to kill, the amount of health items that you can get to heal yourself, or lack thereof, and finally the seeming lack of invincibility frames. You start out a life with 6 health boxes, and each time you get hit by something, you lose one. This effectively means you get hit 5 times without dying, unless one of those hits is you touching fire, which will take 2 or 3 hits off, depending on how long you touch the fire. Most of the time in the game, if you can find a health bonus, it's either a soda, which only gives you 1 health, or a hamburger, which gives you 2. There's also a yin-yang symbol which can be found occasionally, which will give you a full heal. But usually to get one, they're either a bit hidden, or they're a reward for killing a tough enemy. Now, granted, every time you start a new level, your health is returned to full, but some levels are very lengthy, and unless you're just really good, or practice a lot and memorize where to go to avoid enemies and traps, you'll be restarting more than a few times at checkpoints. In most platformers and action games, your character has what are called invincibility frames, which is essentially a term for when your character gets hit, you usually have a second or two where the hit registers, and you're immune from other hits. That doesn't seem to be the case in this game, or if it is, it's a very, very short amount of time. During level 4, I specifically remember a portion of the level where when you're jumping through the trees, if you jump at a platform at the wrong elevation of the tree, 3 enemy ninjas will spawn, and all will throw ninja stars at you, meaning you probably will take at least 2 hits, if not 3, with nothing you can do, other than just memorizing not to jump to that platform and instead take a different way up the tree. In other games, you would take your initial hit and then be invincible when the other 2 stars come across. I'm not sure why the developers decided this was a good move for the game geared towards kids, but they did. Finally, the enemies. As you go through the game, you will face numerous types of enemies. The most common are black ninjas, which can throw ninja stars at you in many directions if you don't defeat them quickly. But you will also fight a stronger yellow ninja, flying animals such as bats and birds, sumos, samurais, and even dragons, not to mention stationary traps that spit fire or darts at you. All of these enemies must either be taken care of or avoided as you progress through the levels, but the problem with this is how many hits it takes to kill them. For anything stronger than a black ninja, you'd better hope you have more than a few throwing bombs to take them out. In each difficulty level you raise, the enemies take more and more hits to kill, which means they have more time to attack you back, and with the lack of the aforementioned invincibility frames, depending on the enemy, you may not be able to simply get right next to them and dig it out. After spending the first hour or 2 playing the game in normal, I switched the difficulty down to easy, and I didn't look back. The game was simply too difficult to the point of not being fun at all in normal, and I don't even want to think what hard mode might be like. Also, in normal and hard, there's no option to pick up where you left off with passwords, as that option is only available in easy mode. So if you're going to attempt normal or hard, that means beating the game through in a single run. You do have a limited amount of continues, but I couldn't quite figure out how many you get, or if you earn more depending on how many points you have. The manual unfortunately doesn't cover that. There are opportunities to earn more lives during a playthrough, by either finding 1-up items, getting 100 tokens, or scoring a certain amount of points, which is nice, but based on everything I've said so far, you're going to need them. After practicing and playing the levels for a few days, I was finally able to beat the game easy, I'm happy to report, but even that took a considerable amount of effort. Now that I've beaten the game up for its difficulty, you see what I did there? Yeah, you did. Let's take a look at some of the things the game gets right, starting with sound. I can definitely tell the programmers for the game had some experience with doing sound on Genesis hardware. The music is pretty great, with multiple tracks of background music depending on which level you're on, and additional music for level completion. It's definitely up there with some of the better Rob Hubbard material we've already covered from the Electronic Arts catalog. The music is never shrill sounding, and it's all upbeat and fits the game well. Along with the music, the sound effects in the game are solid. There's no attempt at speech in the game, other than the screams of each of the 3 ninjas that play oddly when your character gets hurt, rather than doing something cool. But I guess it's a nice audio cue to let you know you got injured if you were in the middle of some frenetic action and weren't sure. The graphics are part of where this game really shines. Every level has a cutscene with dialogue straight from the movie script, and pictures of the characters speaking. These are all well done, and you can tell there was a great effort to make the pictures resemble their actor counterparts. Once you get past those cutscenes and get into the action of the game, you'll notice the game is colorful and has some great animation for a platformer. Whether you pick Rocky, Colt, or Tum Tum, each character moves very fluidly across the screen, whether they're jumping, running, flipping, or attacking. The animation when they stand on the edge of the ledge is very reminiscent of Sonic the Hedgehog. All of the in-game avatars that represent the movie characters all look like the movie characters. I meant what I said earlier about the possible benefits of having a comic book company involved in making a video game, because it definitely feels like people that knew art were responsible for its graphic design. There's also some very nice visual effects thrown in here and there, such as waterfalls, scrolling of the clouds in the background, and the rolling boulders that show the programmers definitely had an idea of what they were able to get out of the Genesis. One thing I haven't mentioned is the fact that the game has a 2-player simultaneous mode as well. I didn't really mess with this much, and I don't think its existence would really change my rating of the game anyway. But I do think it's important to note, just because this is a pretty uncommon feature for platformers. I'm not real sure how well that would work for this game. It might even make it harder, due to how some of the larger levels are structured. And you get penalized for not having both characters on the screen at the same time. But hey, it is there if you don't mess with it. Also, one last thing. While you can select any of the 3 characters to play through the game as, it really doesn't matter which one you choose. Rocky, Colt, and Tum Tum all play more or less the same. Their weapon choice doesn't really change anything other than the graphics. While your thrown weapons will change depending on who you choose, the thrown weapons are almost completely useless anyway, doing almost 0 damage in easy mode, much less the more difficult ones. In fact, I found the thrown weapons actually to be a drawback, due to the scenario where you make contact with one rather than your actual weapon. You would think you only had to hit the enemy perhaps one more time, when in reality the thrown weapon did less damage, and you end up taking a hit because the enemy didn't die when you thought it would. All in all, I'm giving 3 Ninjas Kick Back 2 stars. If I gave out half stars, it'd get 2.5, because while its graphics and sound are above average, and its story is a good condensed version of the movie, gameplay issues and difficulty drag it down. I would play this game instead of Cliffhanger 100 times out of 100, but that's not really saying much. There's just better games out there to play, and giving this game 3 stars with its obvious flaws wouldn't be fair to other 3-star games. However, if you really like difficult games, go ahead and give it 3 stars. And that's 3 Ninjas Kick Back, a game that proves that nice graphics and sound do not make a game. You have to have solid gameplay as well, and perhaps ratcheting that difficulty up to 11 in a game directed at kids probably isn't in anyone's best interest. This is one of those that was nice to experience, due to it being a bit of an oddity being produced by a UK house for a very American product, but I can't imagine going back and playing it anytime soon. Fans of difficult games and platformers should probably give it a look, though. That's all for this episode. Check back with us next time when we take a look at the Genesis version of a Nintendo classic. And remember, whatever you're playing, have fun and be excellent to each other. Later.